I would like to share a little anecdote to introduce our today's MOG Sunday speaker, Ornella D'souza. I'm meeting her for the first time. Before meeting her, I had a little discussion with Subodh Kirkar to know her better in order to introduce you to all. And here's what I get. She's one of the many writers who has written articles about Subodh Kirkar's artworks, and Ornella's article is the best out of all. She has a very poetic way of writing, using metaphors to explain artworks and add a different meaning to them. And this is not just the artist's opinion. Uma Nair is a critic and curator and has been writing for the past 32 years on art and culture, happened to read this article and call Subodh Kirkar to get in touch with Ornella. After meeting her today, my excitement of reading this article and many others has just increased. Now let's get to the technical part. Ornella D'souza is a senior assistant editor with Outlook magazine and writes on socio-political themes in contemporary art practice. In today's freewheeling talk, Ornella will be looking at the use of different everyday non-art objects in art. That's all from me. Over to you, Ornella.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to my talk. It means a lot of you coming here on a Sunday morning. And I'm very happy to be here, actually, to talk about a subject that I love because it's so democratic. It's so open for everyone. You don't really need to be a very famous artist. I mean, to have gone to a very famous art school. You just need to know the rules of what is art to break it. And the world of found object is a form of dissent. It's a form of what people thought or assumed, what the niche elite world of art assumes to be art, which many artists, upcoming artists, feel that no, this is not art. There are so many things that can be art. And it could be anything as simple as a chair, a mic, or rock. Any element that you assume that was not designed to be art. So the purpose of making a chair was to sit on it. It was not meant to be in an art gallery or an art space, but the artist will give it a new meaning. So the world of found objects is when there's less of a painterly skill or a sculpt. Like you won't sculpt the chair from the beginning. You will rather take a ready-made object, keep it, and give it a new meaning. So it's more concept over the work of hands. It's less time consuming, it's less energy in use, it's less money. Sometimes you don't even need money, So a lot of artists feel like this is the best form of expression and it's easy and it says a lot. And the reason why I like found objects is because there's always an element of surprise. When you hear of an exhibition that is, about paintings or sculptures, you kind of expect what to assume. But when you go to an exhibition where there are different objects put together, you don't know what the meaning is. It could be different things for different artists. So through the talk, I will demonstrate that how different artists look at one object differently and give different meanings. And in fact, one artist can even use the same object in her or his or their work with different meanings altogether. So there's so much you can play around with, and I hope to keep it very freewheeling, very casual, and I hope you enjoy this. So great. So we already covered what are found objects, like basically non-art objects, ready-made objects. They have little or no tweakings done to it. Like you don't really play around with like. People usually confuse trash art or recycled art to be found objects. But usually, the object, there's very little anything to be done. So if you, for example, it's not like paper, like you take a tree and you beat it to pulp and it becomes paper. So that is not found object. A tree would remain as a bark in the work of art. So that is what it is. I cannot start this talk without talking about Marcel Duchamp. He's the 17th century French artist who's the one who actually came up with this concept, gave the art world the concept of found objects, is with his urinal, which was signed R. Mutt. And there are many speculations on how he got the object. Someone said that he bought it. Someone said he was gifted the object, or rather he gave it to somebody else. But the work is that he put this in one of the art exhibitions. It was a competition. And they rejected it. because it was like, what is this nonsense? But for him, it was a form of dissent. And that completely changed the way people looked at art, and more artists came forward. And he's one of the pioneers of the Dadaism movement. And from there were various art movements that came in, like the surreal art and even pop art, and the whole idea of conceptual art, like what is design? Because design is the same thing, it's functionality over, sometimes it doesn't need to be a decorative piece, but it just needs to serve the purpose. So the whole thing about concept, that an art object doesn't need to be creative, like you don't need to like work hard and start from scratch, but you just need to give it a concept, and it can say something that's more powerful than something that you put hours and hours of time, effort, money into. And this talk, because the world of found objects is so vast, I'm just going to limit this talk to certain things. Like, I will only look at Indian artists, I will only look at visual arts, because found can be in so many ways. There are found music, when people take different sounds and they put it together, like different sounds that were already invented, or different, they also take objects and they put it in percussion instruments. So found objects can be put in a percussion instrument for a new sound. So that is a whole different realm. Then there is found poetry, where people can either take phrases or words from different poems and then put it together and make it a new poem, or from the same poem, like if you've seen visuals where they blacken so many parts and there are certain words that stand out, and when you read it together it becomes one poem. So that is again found poetry. But there is so much explore, like there's also nature, which Subodh Kirkar dabbles in so much. Like I recently saw your Facebook post on Mushroom Man, where somebody gifted you a bag of dry mushrooms and you used it. It's not completely a found object, but again it's a natural form, and I think it was put on cement, like you made it a head in the design of F.M. Sousa's heads and F.M. Sousa's style, and it had all these mushrooms on it. So it's basically, if you go into all these different genres, it's too confusing. So I'll just keep it at Indian contemporary artists, and that too, like works created just in the last decade or a little before that. So that is that. So found objects basically are to two categories. It's the same thing. One is ready-made, where you just take a ready-made object, and one is assemblage, where the same ready-made object, you take many of such ready-made objects. Either they are all of the same kind, so either they're all microphones together, or it can be a microphone, a chair, a lamp, a fan, and all of them jumbled together to form to form meaning. So I'll start off with Kumari Ranjita. She's a Patna-based artist, and what you see is these are headgears that women laborers wear, like at construction sites, and these actually have different meanings. Like for the laborer, it's everything. It's the headgear to balance the weight of all the construction materials that they have to carry. It also acts like an umbrella in harsh weather. It's also like it's an extension of themselves. Like they sometimes use it as a cradle. They'll just open it and use it as a cradle for keeping their child in it, or sometimes they use it as a blanket. So that one object has so many meanings and they're so attached to it. And what she wants to show with this is what she did basically, she took this vindas, they're called vindas. She asked these laborers for their vindas, the old used, worn out vindas, and she gave them new vindas. So they were very happy, and they were like, they really opened up to her, and they shared their stories and how distressing and depressing their lives were. And she used that, and she made a video and an audio of it. But she also created this work. So she took all these vindas, stacked them together like they're buildings of their own kind. And so when you look together, it's like a city of vindas. It's a city of basically these marginalized voices, these landless laborers, where they build cities for us, and these very cities trap them. They have very little money, despite of working so hard, they don't have any kind of security, they have no rights. And so this is a comment on the marginalized. And Ranjita works with a lot of, most of her works are about the marginalized, because she herself was born in a Harijan colony in Patna. And all her life she faced ridicule in school about her caste and class, but her father was very progressive. He's a Marxist, and he wanted to give her a good education. So she's one of the few children in that colony who actually got that kind of education. So all of her works are, mostly she's a painter, but this is one of the very first works that she did at Clubhouse, Bombay. Yeah, so this is, so what you see is these are ready-made objects. Like, she didn't play around with these windows. She just took them, she stacked them. So ready-made, and then you assemble it. So ready-made plus assemblage, and this is what you get. Then you can have a mixed bag. Like, there's Nandini Bangla, who is based in New York, but an Indian. And this work, which you see on top, these bottles, these are titled as 108, these are titled as 108 Thoughts. And these are, again, it's a mix of found objects, like something she found, something she acquired, either she bought it, or these are created, that's something she created. So these are everything that she uses in her life. And so it could be small kitchen objects, it could be grains, fabrics, needles, threads, old letters, maps, toys also. And each artwork, she put it in a container, so it gives it a very museum kind of exhibit sort of look. But when you put all of this together as a collective whole, you kind of, it's also reading into her personality, her identity, that what are her likes, what does she think, what are her thoughts, what are her ways of surviving in this world. So, and each, so when she puts all that together, that is what you get. Now, as a close-up, I've taken 3 of this because this is what she had put it on Instagram, and she captioned this as, "Are we always measuring, mending, sewing our relationships?" So this is what, she takes different things. Maybe she'll take 1 jar and it'll mean something, maybe she'll take 3. So that is how it goes. Her top work, that is again a form of like assemblage and mixed, is because she purchases these threads. Like, if you recognize, these are the Hindu sacred threads of Moli and Janu, which, the Janu is worn for purification of your inner self, and the Moli is something that you use to protect yourself from diseases, from mental health, mental health problems, and etc. So these threads in combination, what she has done is she's created a beautiful mess of knots, and it's a comment on relationships, that how 2 people are tied to each other in so many different ways. If you open one knot, you're still connected with something. So if you set a person free from one end, there are so many ways to connect with the person, and it's also about balance and also about distance, and in a relationship you need both. And the threads are also fragile. It shows that how relationships are so fragile in today's world, and so little to hold them, and you don't know how long something can last and stay. So this is a work that combines everything, and so that is Nandini's 2 works. Then objects can be slightly tweaked. For example, Shailesh Patne, he's an emerging artist from Bombay, and this is a work that he made in the lockdown. Now the work is actually very direct, if you see its meaning. It's a grinding mill, the old traditional ones where you make your atta. The thing is, like many other artists, Shailesh was without any work in the lockdown. Suddenly all his sources of income stopped. His clients didn't pay him. He didn't have a permanent job, there was nothing. And one day while wandering around, he saw this grinding mill outside, outside a chucky. And he just found it there. So he thought, it gave him an idea. He rescued it, literally. And he already had a lock in his possession. So he welded the 2 together. He already had the welding tools together. So basically this work didn't cost him anything. But it also said everything, that what he was going through. Basically, lock was like, all his resources were locked. There was nothing happening. It's also a comment on the migrant laborers. That, in his words, he's like, the people with the waqt ki roti, the ones who are struggling for even basic things like, atta, it's like the do waqt ki roti, like the comment on that. Like, you take away even that from the laborers, and they have to walk all the way back to their cities and back to their homes, and left with nothing. So what he felt like, our education system is so weak that only the rich and the niche have access to it and then find ways to get better jobs. For the poor, the disparity continues. And he felt he's one of them at that time. And yeah, so it's also a comment on modernism and traditional ways, and that how, because of consumerism, we tend to discard the old things, the old objects, the things that we have inherited from our families, from our past. And yeah, so, but you'd be happy to know that Shailesh now got a job, and he's with the CMS MAS Museum as an art curator in Bombay, so he's pretty happy. This is, yeah. Now, like I discussed, everyday objects, but one's everyday can be very different from another person's everyday. Like, it depends on geography, it depends on caste, it depends on class, it depends on your profession. There are so many factors that what you consider is my daily objects that I use is what someone else will not. For example, the soldiers who are located at Siachen, and the kind of conditions they live in, the clothes they wear, the way they live, basically, is very different from what we live. What they live is, and what they are every day, is very different from our everyday objects that we use. And as a comment on that, a Mumbai-based artist called Baptist Coelho, he created a work. Yeah, so Baptist was always a Bombay boy. He had no army connections. He didn't know what the army was like. But in 2006, he came across this peace project, which let people actually go to Siachen, spend some time with the soldiers. So he went there and he interacted with them, saw the conditions that we lived in, and he got an idea to bring that as art. Now, Baptist is also quite a collector. All his life he has collected things like stamps, and not just how people collect stamps, but just to feel the paper, how it feels from different parts of the world. So when he was in Siachen, he actually asked the soldiers if they can give him some of the objects they use every day. So like this whole big bodysuit, and then some sleeper bags, and as you can see, he's made a vitrine of all the things that the soldiers live, and it's a cold storage sort of thing. So to give an idea, when people look, when you actually enter the exhibition, you could feel like sort of a replication of what the conditions the soldiers lived in Siachen. And the art exhibit of the boots in front of, with the hands behind, it's called Stand at Ease. So here he's kind of mixing a found object with a photograph, which is a conventional form of art. And he's also questioning, the ease in army life. So basically, stand is the boots and ease is the hands. And he's like, is there really any sort of concept of ease as an army person? Because given the treacherous terrains you live in, your life being in danger at any moment, there's no concept of ease. So it's just, he plays around with the word stand at ease. So that is that. And yeah, so like I said, there are many different interpretations. So yeah, one found object can be interpreted differently by different artists. For example, if you take the found object of a bottle, like starting with Subodh Kierkegaard, this is like a manipulated found object because he's used scores and scores of bottles to say something, but they're also manipulated. They're not used in the exact form. Like they were cut, they were painted, they were arranged in a certain way. So when you see the object from far, you won't realize they are bottles, but when you come closer, you will see the changes. So the first object, the top one, this is called Moses and the Plastic Sea. This is basically a parable from the Bible where Moses, to save the Israelites from the Egyptians, he actually went and parted the Red Sea. So when the Israelites ran and the Egyptians followed them, after the Israelites covered the distance, he closed the sea and all the Egyptians were drowned and lost. So what he did is, this was presented at the 2017 Busan Biennale, and he actually positioned it at the sea to show like the partition. And what he says that today, if Moses had to part the sea, he would only find plastic. And so that is the comment. And what he did is, for the next work, the one that you see below is the Carpet of Joy. which again we've done at the Saligaon Circle. That is again a comment on the waste. Both these artworks are a comment on waste, on plastic waste. And he took the help of some 3,000 children to put it together, because he feels like, children still, there is some way of making them explain what is environment, but the adults and the educated, like, it's kind of hope lost. So that is what. It's also his way of, he's a staunch Gandhian. It's also his way of silence Satyagraha. To do something silently but also make an impact. And when you see this large work in one shot, it makes you curious. First you're like, oh, it's so beautiful, and then you realize what it is about. So that is the kind of impact that we wanted to create. Next we go to, again, these are different interpretations of a bottle, a closed glass or plastic object that was made for the purpose of containing something. So we start with the one below. This is by Shilpa Gupta. It's called Untitled Spoken in a Bottle. Basically, it's a vitrine of popped glass bottles. Each are labeled with a poem. Now, depending how the viewer looks at it, you can either look at it as bottled voices, or as she says, it could be preserving the poetic voice. So, it's like preserving different people's dreams, aspirations, hopes, and all the various possibilities that they can have. And for Shilpa, it was not about the shape of the bottle, it was about it being transparent. It's like when you look at the bottle, it looks empty, but it's actually holding a voice. It's actually a poem that's spoken and then bottled. So it's about the quality, about how sound, how things like voice can make an impact, but you can't see it. So that is the comment. Basically, she sourced all these bottles from markets that she used to walk in, to go home and come by, and she would see these bottles in medical shops, in medical and chemical shops. So that's where she picked it up. There's a similar work again by Baptist Coelho. The first and the down one. So the first one is exhibited, said Air in brackets travel, 2015 work. And the instructions, so all these bottles come from different parts of the world, and the instructions that he gave people were like, take a bottle of any kind, any shape, any material, put a leaf in it, and send me a note. Like, basically, he also wanted the air of that land to come to him. And the note is when the author basically penning down his thoughts while writing the note and sending him the bottle. So he got a note from Bangkok by someone called Randall Roach, who sent him a pesto sauce bottle. And he said, the older I get, the more I realize I just want to make stuff. I just want to paint, build, fix, transform. It's all I really need. So this way he got different messages, different notes from different people. So that was one presentation. This second one is again from Siachen. It's an exhibition, he got this from an army officer who wrote a letter next to it, and the note that said was, this work is titled, I think of my brother's only child named Vritti. So the note says, when I put the first rock into the jar, I think about my mother and what she's doing in the home. After I put the second and the third rocks in the jar, I think about my brother and how he is in Kuwait. When I put the small rocks in, I think about my brother's one and only child named Vritti. And when I put the smallest rocks in the jar, I think about my brother's family. So this bottle was the only bottle that we got that was different from the others. It didn't have leaves, it just had rocks. Because it's a comment on how the climate in Siachen is, that nothing grows, and it's so barren, and it's so deserted, and it's also depressing at times. And it's just the sorted thoughts that he collected. Now, both these works, Shilpa's works and Baptist's works, they are very similar to Marshall Duchamp's work, which was titled Paris Air, 1990. It was a delicate glass ampoule which collects air. It's basically a bottle that contains air from Paris. And he bought this bottle from a shop in Paris and from a pharmacist, and he gifted it to a close friend. Now the thing is, the bottle broke after a while, and it was fixed and repaired. So now the question is whether the air is the same or it's some other air. So, but this is, both these works are kind of, almost similar to what Marcel Duchamp had thought at that time. There could be many interpretations of one found object by the same artist. For example, Shilpa Gupta, in terms of microphones. Now, the longest microphone that you see with two mics at either end, that was a 2018 work titled In Our Times, Singing Mobile Microphones. It's just kept in the gallery, and there was an audio that was playing about speeches about Jinnah and Nehru, both during the time of independence and during independence of India and Pakistan. So it was two leaders, world leaders, about India's situation, having opposing views. And both of these audios and both of their voices were played at the same time. So how India was kind of torn between what was happening, that is one. The second is the singing cloud. The big cloud, it's so huge, it's made of 4,000 mics. And so when you look at it, it's very overwhelming. And what it is, it's again many voices playing together, saying different things, even singing. And when you stand and look at it, the voices move in the cloud. It's not stationary, it's like it moves like in one place, one point to the other. And basically, what she was trying to show is that in one nation, there are so many people that exist. There's so much disparity. There's the elite and there's the marginalized, and some people's voices are not heard, some people's are heard. And it's always, there's something or other going on in the country. So that is one, that's another way of looking at microphones. And the third one was presented at the Venice Biennale. This was created in 2018. It's called Four in Your Tongue, I Cannot Fit. Now these are 100 microphones hanging, and there were 100 of these waist-high spikes, and each of them were pierced with a poem by a jailed poet, like someone who was jailed for their writings, for their thoughts, and probably meant death or a long sentence. And the viewer can actually walk through this. It's like a field of all these spikes. You can actually walk through it, read the poems, and it's her way of bringing to light the voices of the ones who were pointed. And so this is a whole presentation. So she's looked at microphones in so many different ways. And so the next one is to your original form, like the vessels. And when I say true to the original form, it's like you actually use, it's not an art object, you actually use it for its design purpose. So you actually use it for what it is. Like you actually use the chair to sit, so you actually use the vessels to cook. Now this is a work by Poonam Gupta. And it's Poonam Jain, I don't know if I made a mistake there. So she's a Goa-based artist, and this work is part of her ongoing series titled Mother Tongues, Vessels of Memory. If you see these vessels, they're kind of inscribed with different languages. These are all Indian languages that she's fluent in. So she's fluent in Kannada, and Tamil, in Marathi, Marwari, Hindi, and even English. And for her, she looks at the kitchen and the utensils. So the kitchen for her can be a library, like the way she has stacked it like shelves, and the utensils are her books. Or she says the kitchen can be a temple, and all these utensils can be the manuscripts. And so it's basically from this tradition of engraving utensils, like I don't know if we do it today, but our parents would make vessels, buy vessels and engrave our names on it, or probably you even give it as dowry, where you write the name of the person and you write the date. And for her, she took that and she used it in the utensils as a form of conveying a message. Like each utensil is used for a different purpose. So she sees the shape and she decides what to do with it, what language to put on it, what to say about it. And for example, the thala, the big plates that you see. So these are which are used in the Marwari households. These are, the men of the family. They sit together and they eat from one thala, while the women are making rotis and the children take it and they serve it to the men. And after the men are eaten, then the women need. So what she has done in this thala, she has engraved it with 180 names of followers that she follows on Instagram. And this is her way of saying, like, this is her way of preserving the names, her choice that I'm going to follow these people. And it's her choice that she has marked for posterity. And she says that the people can come and go, the names will change, but it's still my choice. Whereas the ladies and the children don't have a choice, to eat from the same plate. It's like they have to give the first choice to the men. So it's just a comment on something come from a very personal place. And she gives different meanings to different objects. But what the best part of it is that she feels that the object is not complete till it's actually used for what it is, till it is cooked. So when she presented this work in IISc Delhi in collaboration with Coach Foundation, a day before the exhibition, she actually made chai for everyone who was setting up the exhibition. So when you see that is the the remains of after you made the chai. Then the down one is like gulab jamun. I mean, she used it and takes photographs, and this is the way she wants to prolong it and use it for what it is, because that, according to her, is a work of art. Now, yeah, we cannot talk of found objects without talking of trash art, and the most important person in this category, I feel, is Vivan Sundaram. This trash exhibition was in 2008. So basically, he's building cities of trash, of urban waste, of objects that are just discarded after, like corked. I mean, for bottle caps and toothpaste or used brushes. Or he collects them. He has actually tied up with an NGO which works with waste pickers, and they go to these various waste fields and they pick up objects, and he actually builds cities of these objects in his studio, took photographs of it, and then splashed them on the walls of the art exhibition that he was displaying in. And to show that, he works like a city planner. He takes the role like he's a city planner of a garbage city. That, this is how our cities actually look, according to him. He tries to show the city through the waste. So I think, so this was the earliest work on trash, and then his later works were Gaga, Waka, and Postmortem. You should definitely check him out. He's also, someone has made, Pankaj Kuchalia has also made a documentary on him called In Search of Found Objects, where they actually follow his journey. It's an hour-long documentary on how he actually goes to these landfills. He actually finds an object, what he thinks of the object, how it can be placed. So they trace his process. So that is one. And this is Siddhartha Parabal. He's a Jaipur-based artist. He's again an emerging artist, and what you can see as toys and as the clothes, they're basically second-hand discards, rejects. Even the toys are all Japanese, Chinese, Korean toys, which he has found in Jaipur second-hand shops. And he's like, the cloth is of great quality, the stitching is so fine, there might be a minor flaw that you can't see and they're just thrown. So he uses toys to talk about carbon footprint and about urban waste. And it's also about raw market. Like he says, like imagine you sell Chota Bean, a toy of Chota Bean in China. No one's going to understand it, it's going to go in waste. Similarly, these toys in Korea and Japan, from wherever they originate, are very popular. So they would have a market there. But because of this, sort of unfortunate wrong marketing, you have so much of urban waste just collected and just thrown away. And he got these toys in kilos, like at a very less price. So it's also this sort of these sculptures that he has created is also a reflection on how people are becoming increasingly needy to fit in. The way we see, we are always bombarded with so many ads and so many options today, that the pace of rejecting an object and buying something is the same pace. Like we throw, buy. So he's talking about how that is getting so fast, and that is why that's also leading to urban waste. And a lot of these things which are urban waste are also, which are not needed. Like you don't need toys in your life. Like, these kind of toys, if you can't find any resonance to it. So many of these lesser objects which are not that needy, they are adding up to the urban waste. So he's commenting on different things. Now, the horse that you see was presented in a 2012 exhibition, the India Art Fair. And these are again second-hand T-shirts that it had landed somehow at a Gujarat shipbreaking yard. And basically, again, they were rejects. It was by an American company that had actually given these T-shirts out to distribute, just donate it. But the people there had took it and actually made a profit in a bargain. So, he tries to trace that how things are. There are so many ways that people just find ways to earn and not always in the always devious ways. So that is one. And the last we come to beauty in decay and discard. This is, I would like to talk about Manish Nai's work. This is, he's a Bombay-based artist, and he looks at, if you look at the first one, it's abandoned billboards. The second one is the sheeting, the aluminum roofs that we use, that temporary houses in India, like in slum areas and in shanties, they use as the roofs. And the third is second-hand cloth. So what he does is to take discards and turn them into a work of beauty, a work of art. And it's almost poetic. So he retains the rust, he retains the decay, probably treats it a little. You can't see the treatment, it looks like that is what the piece is. But the first one is a photograph. So he likes to photograph these things and blow them up. The second one is actually a really huge work where he's taken strips of these sheeting and put them together on pieces of wood and made it like a painting, and this was shown in Nature Mod. And the third one is rags, basically rags and second-hand cloth and second-hand garments, which he compressed and compressed different colorful garments and put them on wooden sticks. So his work has reminded many experts of the Arte Povera movement. It's called Art of the Poor. It's a movement that started in Italy for a very brief time during the 60s and the 70s. It's basically when, again, artists of that time challenged the art of using conventional materials. And they just took whatever they had to comment on something. And his work is that. It's basically just something that you see every day. And he's someone who likes traveling in the city. The reason why he's associated, he uses cloth so much is because his father was a trader who used to trade in cloth. And so he saw his father doing business and, the business of waste and the business of, dealing with cloth and with what gets discarded and how it gets discarded. So that stayed with him, and he used, again, wood. So wood and ready-made objects. So that is what Manish Nai has done, and I think that's about it. Thank you.